Hey, 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 it's Rebecca, and you are listening to Resilient by Design. This is another roundtable. Oh my goodness, I just realized I haven't been singing much lately, for better or for worse. Man, I gotta infuse a little bit more song into my podcast. It brings me joy. Sidebar 2021, I've decided I just want to focus on things that bring me joy. So I'm only going to take on the projects, do the courses, do the things that really bring me joy because honestly, life is too freaking short. That's my sidebar. Back to the podcast. Today is another roundtable. It is awesome because I love hearing from multiple voices in the industry. I interview Carly Nemtean of Carriage Design Build, who's also the co-founder of the Collective Workspace. And I just forgot, she has also been on this podcast before. She was on my previous roundtable with Jessie Kelly, where we talked all about process. So if you want to listen to that one, go back. I'm not sure the number, but it's there. And then my other guest today is Erica Gelman of Erica Gelman Design here in Toronto. And she and Carly are good friends. I know her through the Toronto design scene, and they both expressed interest to me independently on talking about team building, hiring, firing, when to hire, how do you know, what do you do in this situation? And honestly, this conversation is extremely candid. Each of them shares very recent current experiences that they are going through with team members. We coach each other through, and I just think it's an interesting, very unique conversation, one that we have not had yet on the podcast. If you like hearing us talk about team building, I really hope you let me know and we can do a little bit more of this. Who knows? Maybe I'll turn it into like a 2 or 3 part series. Go check out my podcast with Carly and Erica. All right. I'm Rebecca Hay, and I've built a successful interior design business by trial and error, podcasts, online courses, and so many freaking books. Over the last decade, I've grown from an insecure student to having false starts to careers, and now I'm finally in the place where I want to be. Throughout my journey, it's been pretty obvious that I'm passionate about business and helping other entrepreneurs do the same. Each week, I'll share tangible takeaways from my own experience and the experiences of other badass women to help you build your confidence and change your business. Are you as tired as I am working in a bubble? I mean, shoot. It's time to maybe socially distance with other people. That is why I love coming to the Collective Workspace. If you are someone who is looking for a little bit of stimulation, a lot of beauty, the Collective Workspace is a really great place to go. It is a co-working space for designers, architects, and builders in Toronto, and they're opening a second location this spring. They have flex workspace and offices starting at $120 a month. There's boardrooms, a podcast booth, which is where I am right now, concierge, storage, and a trade-only design library. You can find out more, or if you want to book a tour, go to thecollectiveto.com. Okay, we're live. Here we go. Oh my goodness. I'm here with Carly. Sorry.
Take 2.
I don't know why I'm laughing. I'm here with Carly and Erica, and I'm just going to let them introduce themselves. Who wants to go first? Erica?
Hi, I'm Erica Gelman. I run Erica Gelman Design Inc. We're based here in Toronto, but we do projects kind of all over the place. We specialize in full service residential design. We dabble a little bit in commercial, but our niche is really residential. And it's really about taking projects from conceptual stages all the way down to execution and really kind of handling all the details in between. So that's who I am and what I do.
Awesome. Carly?
So I'm Carly Nemtean, and I have been running Carriage Design Build for about 10 years now. And I recently opened up the Collective Workspace pre-pandemic, which is a co-working space for designers, architects, builders in the Toronto area. And we're actually opening up our second location this spring in Mississauga at TIDC. Our design build business focuses on mainly additions and renovations, and we actually do the construction design as one aspect. And just like Erica, we still have started migrating towards doing more commercial work, but definitely right now our niche is additions and renovations in the GTA.
Awesome. And you are currently recording in the podcast booth where I typically record, but because I'm stuck, stay at home, I'm quite envious. You also have buttons. So if you feel like hitting the applause button at any point, you know that podcast thing in the booth, you can hit like applause or
I don't have it here with me.
Oh, you're not using it. Okay.
I didn't set it up today because I didn't know how the sound would work.
Okay. Well, anyhow, next time I'm there, I'll show you. It's great.
Okay.
Okay. Well, the reason I wanted to have you both on the podcast is interesting. I independently reached out to each of you to say, hey, like, I'd love to have you on the podcast. What are some areas? Like, these are the areas I think, and what would you be interested in talking about? And you both expressed interest in a topic that we have not touched on at all on the podcast yet. So I got really excited. And then I thought this would be perfect because you two are friends, you know each other well. And so to have a bit of a round table, I have only done this one other time. And that was actually, Carly, you were in my other round table with Jesse when we talked about process. And so it was really, that was in person. Yeah. So slightly different. But you both wanted to talk about team building. And that excites me because it's something that I have been going crazy over for several years now. And I don't always get the opportunity to talk about it because not a lot of designers even have a team. Some have one person, but I know there are designers listening to this podcast, whether or not they have a team, they are looking probably to expand their team, maybe bring on a hire they haven't hired before. And also just like, it's like really, I don't know, navigate the waters because it's almost like a whole other job, don't you think? Mm-hmm. Managing people.
Oh my God. Yeah. And you're not necessarily good at it, right? Like you may not be the hat that you're meant to wear.
Right.
Yeah. So Erica, I don't know, I think we're just going to dive in and just have a real conversation about, I don't know, growing and managing a team.
Well, it's funny because you said, you might not be good at it. So it's interesting that you say that because the way that designers, most of the time, why we start bringing on new team members is because we need help. And we're very different from large corporations who have, an HR department, a hiring department. Then you have managers and you have all these different positions that you're trained for. And I think that as designers, when we hire, especially your first hire, it's because you need help. So I think that for me, my biggest issue, and we're going back, oh my gosh, my first hire, I think was 2013, I want to say. So that was, just someone part-time, just helping me out with drawings and stuff. And because you are still so busy, you actually don't really get time to train people. And I think that comes back to, are you good at it? And it's not we need someone to be of assistance to us, but then we also have to now split our role into being what we're good at as the designer, and then also becoming someone else's manager, leader, again, that HR department, the everything else that you weren't prepared for, just thinking, oh yeah, I'm just going to have someone come in and, help me out. And then you end up now creating a secondary role for yourself as well.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. Full disclosure, first of all, I just want to say that I'm not an expert in this arena. I just want to preface that so I think definitely when you're coming on board, especially Erica, when you and I started, you didn't have resources. The internet wasn't as resource, even the resource of the internet just wasn't where it is today. And so I think the younger generation is very lucky that information is so free flowing, but before you had to really learn on your feet and no one was there to guide you unless you had a mentor. Because now, like, there's so many more outlets to understand. Like, now we have an in-house HR company that we pay a monthly fee. It's called Peninsula, and they assist us on our hiring, our firing, our putting people on on severance, especially during COVID, how to react efficiently, making sure we have a full contract, a handbook. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's all bullshit when it comes down to it.
Tell it like it is, girl.
It is. It's just bullshit when it comes down to it. There's like, it's literally a house of cards.
Yeah. I mean, so I think I think what Carly's referring to is the idea that you can plan and prepare and have all the things set up and in place and the training and the onboarding. But until you're actually like going through it, it's hard to navigate, and you can have what you think is the best hire or the best assistant. And, you think you're paying them fairly. You think the job is suited to them, and it doesn't work out. They could either leave or they're making mistakes that you didn't expect. And then you have to deal with letting them go, right? Like, it's a house of cards in that sense that there's only so much you can control. And especially as a designer, not having necessarily that skill set, HR, really like leading a team in addition to doing the design, handing over control. It's a messy business.
You know what? I always laugh when they come to me with questions and then I forget. It's funny. Like, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but it's funny that I forget how much I know. And you kind of just expect other people to know these things, when they're like, just going back to like rough-ins and trims, they'll be like, well, yeah, no, we're getting the trim. So is that enough for the plumber? And I'm like, no, you need the rough-in. And I forget that you need to train these people and they need to somehow get into your brain and become like a secondary and like a third and a fourth, part of you. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of training, and having a team is a huge investment, not just financially, but a huge investment of your time. Because I know, Carly, you mentioned like when they start making mistakes. And I think that that's something that when you do start hiring a team and start building this team, you almost forget that they're not you, and they need to be handheld and told how to do their jobs, which in other companies that there's a training process and there's like all these steps that they take to get to a position where they're at, I feel like in the design world, and obviously the bigger you get, and like the more people that you have on your team, like maybe I think it's a little bit more fluid. It's a little bit easier. But especially like smaller firms, it's a huge time crunch. Or time suck rather.
Well, it takes 8 months to a year, I think, to fully train and get on the same page with a new hire. And I think that, for example, I just I'm choking on my words.
Share it. Tell us. Bear it all.
I've been having, people basically resign. And, some of them have been working with me for 1.5 to 2 years minimum. And you realize it took this long just so that you could understand what my need, like what your job entails.
Yes.
And now it's like, you have to go back, and it's part of doing business, but at the same time, why is it like, usually, within the first 3 months with this person, usually that 1.5 year is like, I don't know. It's a tough thing. Cause now you're like, okay, now it's gonna take me 8 months to a year to retrain a new person, get on the same page before I can really step away from that role. But the thing is, like, how do you in the collective sector, how do you scale? How do companies scale when you're only as good as your team member, but yet your team member, clocks in at 9, clocks out at 5. They're not, they're here to get a paycheck. How do you maintain that ambition? How do you maintain that momentum? How do you lead properly? How do you grow that team how do you grow that team in a pandemic? That's the next issue.
Oh my God.
I'm having. And Like, how do you, now we have to bring on a new team member. It's like, but wait, how am I supposed to, like, design is all about passion and energy and, collaboration. How am I supposed to trust this person that I've never even seen their full face?
Yeah, totally.
How do you do that?
Okay, I'd like us just to 1 second, take it back a notch, because I'd like for each of you to share your experience with your very first hire. Because I know there's a lot of designers listening that are not at that place yet. I just think it's always interesting to see everybody else's stories. You guys know my story. I've shared it before. It involves Carly. If you haven't heard my story, go back and listen to podcasts. I'll figure out what number it is. The podcast I did with Carly and Jesse. Carly poached my employee, my very first hire. Just saying.
I didn't poach
I'm just
them.
joking.
Oh my
Anyways,
God, that's not how you
can you? I'm just teasing you. I like to tease. Okay, I would love to hear both of you. Like, who was your first hire? Not their name, but like, what role was that? Erica,
Like a real hire. So I think, like I said, I think it was around like 2013. So I had opened my business in 2008. And when I say open, I have this conversation with like everyone who always asks me about my quote unquote success. So I opened my business in 2008. Does that mean that I was like making money? No. Was I getting projects left, right, and center? No. I was still working at that time. I went back to work for actually my parents. Anyways, so by the time I really started kind of like getting into the swing of things, getting projects, working on projects, was probably around 2010. And then I started getting really busy over the next couple of years. And then I think it was maybe 2012 or 2013 where I decided, okay, you know what? I'm actually going to hire someone. I 100% need that help. So I hired a student, like a freshly graduated student, which is, I didn't know any better. I thought that's what you're supposed to do. But then I thought they were going to come to me knowing everything. So I needed someone to do my CAD because I just felt like that was taking up so much of my time. And I always say, like, I excel on job sites. That's where I need to be. I need to be on site. I need to be with my clients. I need to be with the contractors. That's where I shine. I don't shine sitting behind the computer, but some people do. So, this girl came to me. She had great energy, which is like kind of like one of the biggest things that I look for. And she was hired just to come in, like just to do CAD. And then she started, telling me, oh, I could like do hand drawings and stuff. So she would do basically all the like anything visual for me. And that's what she was really good at. But then I was like, okay, well, now I have someone that I'm paying to work for me. Maybe she can start doing other things. And actually, Carly and I were having this discussion a few days ago about like dismantling a position and then kind of like starting like figuring out like what's wrong with that position. So with the first person that I hired, I was trying to give her like just more stuff to do because I'm thinking, okay, well, she's already there. I'm going to start having her do this and she did not want to do it. She didn't know how to do it. I didn't have the time to sit down and train her. I would get frustrated because, again, I'm thinking like, well, why doesn't she know? I know how to do it. She should know how to do it. I think you forget. And then very, very quickly, she burnt out because I think she had too much on her plate and she's fresh out of school. She's working, part-time. Probably, I don't even remember what I was paying her. Probably very little because I didn't have enough money to like hardly pay myself. So she burnt out and left. Like she was just like, yeah, I'm going to find a job like closer to home and kind of use that as her reasoning to leave. And she was coming in for about an hour away. And at that time I was working out of my basement. So it wasn't like a glamorous position. Not that design is glamorous. That's a myth, everyone. If you're not in the design world and you're listening to this, that's the myth. But, it wasn't this professional environment. Like she'd work in my basement. I would have to leave. So the dogs would be like running around upstairs and, like people would be coming in and out. It just wasn't and I kind of look back and I don't think I set it up properly. And I think that as you, like, as an entrepreneur and as a business owner, now I can kind of reflect back and say, like, what is the actual position that I'm hiring for? Whereas I think at the very beginning, when you want to bring that one person on, they end up becoming this like umbrella of everything. Like they'll kind of do stuff that you throw at them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're trained to do it, that they want to do it, that that's what they were hired to do. And then that's how I think like this whole turnover of staff happens so frequently. Also, if you do end up giving them too much, then they think, okay, well, I could do this. Like, why am I working for someone else? I can do this on my own. And then they leave for that reason. So I think that hiring that like one person, you really have to know what you're hiring them for and let them excel at that. And then either bring on someone else to do other roles or, have a talk with them to see if they want to expand their role, continue to grow, all that kind of stuff. Whereas I think we just kind of dump it on their plates. Just naturally.
Yeah.
I don't think we do it on purpose.
I did the exact same thing, Erica. Like my first few hires, it was the Wild West.
Yeah.
It was chaos. I was like, you're a design student. Great. You can do AutoCAD. Can you also do invoicing? Here, now do this thing. I needed that yesterday. And they could never make me happy. They were continually disappointing me because I didn't even set any expectations. Like they didn't know what my expectations were. There was definitely no position. It was like assist. And when you're starting your firm, and even with the first few years into running a design firm, everyone has to wear multiple hats. And so I think that's where it can get kind of stressful as a new designer who's hired someone to help them. I used to get super stressed. And this is why I think my first hire left, among other reasons, is that I was so stressed out about the finances that every half an hour of her time, I remember thinking in my head, like, oh my God, I just paid this much money for that. I just paid like I couldn't separate myself. It wasn't until I finally stopped paying attention to like the hourly so obsessively that I was able to give that person some breathing room to do the job. But I think you hit the nail on the head with something that's really key is understanding what the position entails and helping them to thrive in that position. That's really interesting. Carly, what was your first experience like with a first hire?
So, I mean, I started off having a business partner who already had about, 25 years of experience. So that was a real leg up. And basically, it wasn't until we were able to together realize, okay, like, and he would set me down and say, okay, what are the things that are bogging you down? What are the things? And then we really like work towards, okay, what do we need that person to do? So he was such a huge aspect of making sure that transition was great. The person that came on, she, was able to focus on drawings and start helping spec. And it became like a real relationship, which is one of the biggest no-nos. And, unfortunately, he got burnout and stress from a particular situation where, we were in over our heads and we put some of that responsibility on her. And that really, when everything went sideways, we all took responsibility, but it really left a deep scar. So, she left at that time. And actually, when she left, I brought on this architectural designer who ended up turning into being my husband. So there is a silver lining to that. Yeah. So I either become best friends with my team or I marry them.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment, is that idea of how deep the connection you make with your employees. I mean, I think there's a lot of school of thoughts there, but I do agree. It's like there has to be a line in the sand where if you get too tight and too close, like it's your best friend, I think that could cause problems down the line, and making sure that you're still
Yeah.
available to them and that you're still in touch with what's going on in their life. But I've started to learn that I need to kind of take a step back. And like, if they're all hanging out on a Zoom on the weekend or over the holiday, or it's like, it's okay that I'm not a part of it. Like that's it. I love that the people who work for me have become friends together.
Yeah.
But it's good to keep that separation. Even though we can have a good time, once upon a time when we would have Christmas parties, we'd have a nice dinner, we'd have fun.
Yeah. But this just to cut you off right there, the fact that so everyone's friends, the problem is though, is when there's a bad apple and then it spoils the batch.
Yeah.
So there's like pros and cons to every situation.
You do though. So Carly, and I know, like I know exactly what you're saying because I had a similar situation, like one bad apple, like basically ruined like a whole team. But at the same time, I think that there needs to be that connection because we spend normally more time with the people that we work with than we do with the people at home. So you have to go to work having a good connection with the people that you work with, because otherwise you dread being there. And what happens?
What is that fine line, right? Where you become, you have to lead as a woman. It feels like a lot more personal, I find, than when there's a male counterpart. Like even seeing the relationship that, Rocco has with our team, there is a line that's a lot more,
defined
than, or maybe they just hide it better than we do.
It could also be that as women, like I can't speak to your situation, but I think sometimes as women, we tend to want to nurture and help people. And we tend to sometimes go a little bit, get too involved emotionally. And then it hurts or it stings when that person either is the bad apple or bad seed or leaves. Mm-hmm. I learned the hard way in the last few years. I've done it more than once. I didn't learn my lesson after just one time. The importance of hiring for personality first and then skill set second. I've made the mistake of hiring somebody with the skill set that I thought we needed and kind of turned a blind eye or didn't really trust my gut that it wasn't the right personality fit. And it's more than once has bit me in the behind. Hiring for personality over skill, like they still need to have the skill, but if the personality isn't there, or the fit, I say personality, I mean more like cultural, social values, right? Your core values as a company. You want them to be on the same page. Because if you don't have that, then the skill set, it really doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
And they're not going to be happy either because they're not going to understand you as a leader. That's what I've learned, right? It's like, well, why is Rebecca like this? And she's so quick and makes decisions and whatever. But if they're such a far extreme from me, it's hard for them to get on board.
Absolutely. And it's difficult. And Carly, I get what you're saying about, like that, like as women, like we do have a different kind of communication and relationship with our teams than the men do. But at the same time, I think that we also, because of that, for me, especially like I think we hire emotionally too, or at least I do. I know that I hire emotionally. So if you and they said this when I was in university, like, or the person who's interviewing knows within the first couple minutes, like if you're going to work out on this position. And there's always something that very rarely has anything to do with the skill. Like, I'll look at the resume and okay, yeah, they all say the same thing. They all excel at this and they all, they're good at that. That's great. But there's always something that kind of triggers me. And it's either something that they've said, and I mean, it could be a good trigger too, like something that they've said, or actually one of my employees who just ended up leaving, who was like, I loved her, still love her. We actually ended up wearing the same shirt she wore the shirt and she was wearing a dress and I was wearing the shirt version to her interview. And I looked at her didn't speak one word to her. She just walked in for the interview and I'm like, yeah, I'm probably going to hire this girl. It was just, I didn't even know and she ended up being amazing. She ended up being one of like the strongest team members I've ever had. And I miss her terribly, but she had a massive commute to work every day. So, we'll keep it at that. But she was just such a strong team member. And like I said, I knew within minutes, without having read her resume, I knew, obviously, if you're already there, I've looked at your resume.
But Erica, so like, if that person had come across my plate, I would have, and like had the same reaction. I think one of the biggest things I would have looked at though is like where their location, because now you've invested all this time into training them. Now you start from the beginning. So it's like, at the same time, was that really ideal? Because they showed you what you're missing, but then now has to leave and leaves you even more disappointed. So
I'll tell you, losing team members, especially good ones, it doesn't just affect one person. Like it affects everything. It's a domino effect that, when they say like, you give 2 weeks notice, in 2 weeks, you cannot, there's no, oh my gosh, like there's just not enough time. It really does affect everything, and it affects the business. It affects everybody. I think it also changes the morale of the company, because you could be on, there could be a certain vibe and everyone is excited and knows the people that they work with. And then all of a sudden, like, okay, well, this person left, so now we have to hire a new person. And then other team members are thinking like, well, who's this new person going to be? And are we going to have that same energy? And I think that it really trickles down to every single person in the business really being affected by it, not just the actual like position or company or anything like that. So going back to like that emotional, the emotional state when you hire, I think you kind of have to put that into play also. Like when they leave, it really affects everything. So how do you question, and I don't know the answer to this, but how do you make those right choices? Like, how do you bring on those team members that are there for like the long run, and they're growing your business with you? And how do you make those right decisions?
I think honestly, in my experience, I think it's not about the right choice, because I think I do this. I fixate on, is it the right decision? Is this the right person? What should I do? What should? But what I think is more important is just understanding, like all of us are a perfect example of that it is going to always, unfortunately, be a learning experience. So it's like every person who comes into our fold and leaves brings something that then we know for the next time, oh my God, I have to have someone who wears the same dress as me. That's just a funny example. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Or like, I have to have someone who is this organized. Like, I didn't know someone could be that organized before. I really think that like the only way that we can grow as business owners and design firms is by continually looking at every person who comes through as a learning experience, and that as the owner, as the principal who's doing the hiring, that we have to make sure we take stock. And like, I'm saying this for myself, because there's been times where I've had people come through and I make the same mistake, right? I'm not paying close enough attention to, okay. And the other part is that it's just part of doing business. Having people come and go is part of doing business. And this is something my husband used to always say, and I would get so frustrated because I would be like emotionally distraught that somebody left, or so upset that I had to let someone go, or that they resigned or whatever. And he was like, it's not a big deal. It's just business. People are going to come and go. And I think that maybe that's the difference between men and women a little bit, is that I feel much more invested. I take things personally, but just thinking about it as it's for the company to grow, we are going to need to shift it. As I'm sure Erica and like Carly, you both have grown your firms so incredibly that what you needed 5 years ago is very different than what you need now. And sometimes too, the people that you start out with are not the people that can get you where you need to go. They don't, the skill set you need when you're starting is not the same skill set. It still stings when they leave though. I'm not going to take that away from you. That still sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Oh,
for
I'm
us,
sorry.
what we typically find is like I was talking to Erica, like we try to separate positions after that first hire. Now we've realized that like everyone has more of a position so that they focus and manage, either like just the drawings or all the sourcing. We just find that way it's easier to replace that cog rather than them having hands in so many different aspects. But another thing is really like having those reviews. And sometimes we fail to do it as often as we should because business gets busy. But those reviews are so important because we ask our teammates, like, what are the things that you're gravitating towards? What are the things you're hating? What are the things that, make like are frustrating? Because they typically, and because they will gravitate to the things that they like, and they'll have a to-do list with everything scratched out that they love doing, but nothing scratched out that they hate doing. And then you realize like, well, you just can't get your head around, either like the administrative work. So that's really that person that you either have to offload that responsibility or hire a new team member to really excel in that. Right. But you won't know until you really see where they gravitate towards, because people, it's not like it, back in the day where you just wanted to like offer your services and just dive in. Like not everyone likes that anymore. And like you said, Erica, like they can't read our minds. And that's the biggest issue, is that we are an unregulated industry and there's not process, even though people are starting to build process, like Rebecca and other designers and coaches, where that is what happens in the commercial sector. But in the private sector, it's not something that comes, prepared and handed over. So, those are things that we are already in that chaos, and we just expect someone else to read our minds and know what we need. And that's what gives employees the most amount of dissatisfaction and anxiety in their role, and many reasons why they need to leave, because the leadership there is lacking. And that's one of the things that, me as well, like I'm looking at why we had such turnover this year in overall. And is this COVID related? Is this depression related? Is this because of leadership? Because, I pulled out because I had to go on a mat leave and, for a short amount of time, and we're in COVID. So it's hard to really rally your troops up. So, we're actually doing an internal audit right now as to, and sitting down individually with all of our employees and also our most recent, employees that have left, and understanding, why is it that you left? What are the things that we could have improved on? Where are there gaps? How is your job not descriptive enough for you to stay? What are the reasons, so we, and that is something that we don't do enough of, but at the same time, you hope someone puts up their hand, but reality is people don't. And you have to be able to open up, keep your eyes open, because most people I'm seeing right now, especially with COVID, their eyes are glazed over and they're just going through the actions without actually like taking conviction.
So it's one of the things that you touched on is the review. And I will admit this. I'm also like a huge admitter of my faults. Like I don't think that failing at anything or doing something wrong necessarily reflects like who I am as a designer, as a business owner, as anything like that. Like as a person, I actually like at some point making a mistake so I know how to correct it. But I 100% know that people that have worked for me in the past, why they have left, because they were probably at some point overwhelmed. The job position was, it ended up becoming different from what they were originally brought on to do, or we didn't have enough help to do it. And, whatever the case is, but that review, I didn't sit down and ask them how their job was treating them, if they were happy with what they were doing, if they wanted. Now I ask, do you want to do more of something? Do you want to do less of something? Even just having that, like, are you good? Like, are you now I started like when everyone starts working like on crazy overtime, like next week, I'm giving everyone like an extra long weekend. And I said, everyone's been working crazy overtime. I'm acknowledging this and I want everyone to have like a little bit of that extra needed break. So I'm closing the office on the Friday before the long weekend. So we have that like extra time to relax. But I think that that's really important because like we as business owners are we expect that it's a heavy workload. I don't think that necessarily bringing on like new hires and new positions and like, people who work for us and creating that team, I don't know if they necessarily expect the stress level to be where it is because it's the design industry. So
what
like,
are you talking about? Stress? What stress?
Exactly. Right. Like how stressful can it possibly be? Like we're designing, we're making pretty things. And I think that like once they're actually in it and, we tend to throw them in like the deep end right away, especially for us. Like I'll tell new employees all the time, like, just so you know, you're going into the deep end with like life jacket or no life jacket, like sink or swim kind of thing. But I think that having those conversations with them and really just saying like, are you happy in your position? Like, it's just so simple. And hearing their answer. And if their answer is like, no, find out why. And I did not do enough of this. I probably still don't do enough of it now. At least now I acknowledge it and know that it's something that I have to like stay on top of. And it kind of goes back to what we were originally talking about. As designers, we need help and we're not necessarily trained to be those leaders or like that management. So, you kind of have to like learn as you go. But I think that's one of the biggest leadership or how to be a good leader kind of like role is to make sure that your team is happy. Because if they're not, it's not their business. They're going to leave.
Yeah. And I think too, to add to that point, Erica, first of all, I totally agree with you. Totally. I interviewed Mindy Applebaum. If you guys haven't listened to that episode, she runs luxury move management here in Toronto. And she had some very similar advice to you, Erica, which I really took to heart. And I decided to do a check-in with my team because occasionally I do a review, but I wasn't consistent. And I knew it had been a while because of the pandemic. And I'm like, I'm just going to do a check-in. And I like how she said, just like you said, it's literally like we did a 15-minute Zoom. It's a one-on-one. And really, when you think about it, how often do you just get that one-on-one time with one person on your team if there's more than one person?
Yeah.
And it was literally like, what are you enjoying? What aren't you enjoying? And then I also did what she recommends, which is asked for feedback on me as a leader.
Oh.
And I was like, hey, like, is there anything that you think I could do better? Or like, do you have any feedback for me? I mean, a lot of the times people are probably too scared to say anything, but it opened up that dialogue and it made them feel heard. And it was very casual as opposed to where I used to do like, we're having a mid-year review and here's the questions to prepare in advance and like all that stuff. But I agree with you, Erica. It's like just having a 15-minute check-in with them to sort of see where they're at. Without the pressure of it feeling like a review, because often I think too, we make the mistake of assuming people just want more money or they feel underpaid. And I, it actually was my old office manager who brought this to my attention from her previous employer. She said, a lot of the times there's so many things you can do to make people love their job more. And it's not necessarily money. It could just be something light and cheery. I mean, we're not in the office right now, but it could be like a lunch or like you just did. I think that's such a good idea. I'm like, why didn't I think of that? It's such a good idea. Giving them the extra day on the long weekend. It just sort of shows them that you are in touch with them and that you care. I think that's really great. Yeah, totally.
I'm a little jaded right now.
Oh, girl.
I'll tell you what I think. I'm not gonna make any friends necessarily on this call with people listening, but
yeah, be honest.
So be real.
This is my 2 cents. I think most people don't tell you the brass tacks in the interview, and why would they? Because obviously everyone's puts on like the appropriate mask to try to land that job. I get it. We all faked it till we maked it. Okay. Like it's a common theme running through here. I think the hardest thing is knowing that when things do come to light, you realize really at the end of the day that as much as you love your teammates and as good as they are for the time that they're with you, there is an expiration date.
Mm-hmm.
And that expiration date can either end nicely or it can end terribly. It can end mediocrely. But at the end of the day, everyone is in it for themselves.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, as much as you put into the relationship from both ends, it's a job at the end of the day, right? It's a 9 to 5. And there's some people that go above and beyond and it's a family, but at the end of the day, they walk away and that's the end of it, right? It's like a relationship, right? Like a boyfriend, right? Like once you guys break up, it's like, what? Like we just dated for 4 years. Like, what do you mean I'm not going to talk to this guy every day? What do you mean I'm not going to see him anymore? Like this guy was a part of my every single day. And it's, and you realize that like, that is what relationships tend to be like in today's day and age. And it's sad because, things come to light and you realize like, oh, like they weren't really that honest with me to begin with, but that's how they started the relationship. And then everything kind of, so like I said, I'm a bit tainted right now because I don't want to discourage,
but I don't want to discourage the designers listening.
I have some great
hiring.
I have some great team members and I have, but at the same time, I get concerned of like, how is it, like, what is the exit strategy for that person? When is that coming? Because now, especially with COVID, it's like anything is possible, right? And with COVID too, people are getting serious burnout and people are migrating positions and like shifting careers and moving away. So now it's even that much more accelerated. I can't even stress to you that over the holidays, I've had so many team members reassess their life goals over the holidays in the middle of COVID and had these epiphanies that they had not had prior to the holidays. So
I know, but I want to remind you of something that you've got going for you that you just finished telling us that so many designers would love to be at, which is you and Rocco have very clear descriptions of what those roles entail. You are like 10 steps ahead of the game, girl, because you already have that in place. Mm-hmm. So replacing that person, like you're saying you don't have that exit strategy or whatever you would call it for that employee, but in a way you do because you're doing everything right. You're just in like a shitty time. I feel like you're doing everything right. You've got the role descriptions and now you're doing an internal audit. And I think that all of us are going to be going through these cycles of figuring that out. And so like, I think you're really well positioned. And if anyone who's listening to this, is afraid of growing a team because it's challenging, it is challenging, but it's rewarding.
Yeah, there's
and I think the lesson that I'm learning from you is like, if you can have a clear cut, and I had this conversation this morning with somebody else just on the phone about having like a position contract and not so much like, here's all the things you're responsible for, but like, this is your position in the company and these are the results. And so a new person coming in can understand where they fit into the puzzle. For years, I didn't have anything. I was like, yeah, you're an assistant designer. You get to do everything. And no wonder people burned out and they left because like, it was ridiculous. They could never keep me happy. Like you are set up, girl. You are set up. You just need to find the right people and put them in the right seats.
I think for a new designer or a designer that is making that decision to expand, because I think that's really what it is. Like when you start hiring, you're expanding your company. And you're now able to do more and probably take on more. And that's kind of how the ball starts to roll. So I think that one of the most important things, and like learn from us who have made these mistakes, is exactly what Carly said. Have an exact role definition and try, because I know with like we're such gray areas like in this business where things always spill over into like other positions, but really try to have them only do what they're meant to do or what they were hired to do. And then if you find that they're now doing other things that's when you have to ask the question of, do I now have to bring on someone else, maybe even part-time? Can I, usually the answer is no to this. Can I take on a little bit more and like not have them do that? Or, like there's been times where like I don't do the like the internal project management anymore. Like I have my team do that. But sometimes if I know that there's a lot on their plate and there's a project that's like coming to an end, or, there's not that much happening there, I'll say to them, I'm taking on the project management. Like you can still have correspondence, but I'll do like all the little stuff, just to kind of like take something off their plate, because again, like you have to know that they were brought on. It's the same thing as working for like a large corporation. When you hire somebody in, let's say like the IT department, you're not going to all of a sudden now have them like do the HR. And now you're not going to have them like be the janitor. And, they have particular roles. They're not going to become the receptionist. Like they were hired to do something. And I think that we so often forget that, because we're used to doing everything. And when we bring on, it's especially that first person.
But like,
totally.
I kind of disagree with help, giving it, like you're there as support, but the problem is we're the clogs in the line, right? Like we're the bottlenecks.
Yeah.
At least I know for myself, I'm the like if I'm supposed to handle something, it'll fall through into my list of to-dos, and then I'm holding something up. So I say to everyone, like, do not include me in this. And they know, because I don't want to slow them down. And then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, no, you're supposed to do that. And then you forget who's responsible. And so
totally,
I find that taking a step back, and if they need support, walking them through it and making sure that like, hey, where's your to-do list? It's a lot worse in your head than it is when it's on paper.
Mm-hmm.
Let's like go through it. Let's reassess.
I love that. Such a good
what
line.
are our priorities? Which line? No,
like that. It's so much worse in your head than it is on paper.
Yeah. It's so much. And the problem is like when Rocco and I have meetings with our team, and we see them, okay, they say to us, oh, we're so busy. Okay. That's too generalized. What are you busy working on? Because everyone can just walk around all day and say they're busy. But at the end of the day, if you're not producing results and you're just spinning in a circle, then like, obviously we have to reassess. So we go through an exercise where they have to write. We've now actually taken everything on to Monday, and everyone has tasks. We have jobs. We have pipelines on there. We have like miscellaneous to do, and everyone is assigned to it based on like what the responsibility is. And we have one person managing it, making sure that we're the status of all those things, so that everyone's lists are kind of on a broad spectrum in terms of everyone has access to it. So, and we have one person managing it. And that has made my life easier, especially having to step out when, I had the baby and and running Collective, and it just allowed things to streamline. So we have one person really making sure everyone's getting their job done, because it literally says incomplete on the app. So
what's the person's role? The person who's managing, what's their role? What's their job title?
So that person's role is our design. My God, I don't even know the name of it anymore. It's basically the design and construction supervisor.
Okay.
And her role is to make sure that she doesn't design. She just makes sure that the designer in our team is getting that done. She's making sure that the guys on site are installing that fixture. She's making sure that, yes, everything got delivered. She's making sure that I'm working on the inspirations. She's making sure, so she's really making sure that sales channel is moving properly, because otherwise we'd just be stagnant, and we'd be all over the place. But my job is to make sure.
She sounds like an integrator.
She's an integrator. Yeah, she is an integrator. Her and Rock are the integrators, and I'm the, what's the other word? The other role?
The visionary. You're the visionary.
The visionary. I'm the visionary. I'm not a details person, and she's a details person. I can't.
That's so
I
smart.
see the overall, and like I can't, because I will disappoint people every time if I have to get into the weeds.
But I think that's really I think that I'm going to toot your own horn right here, because you don't toot your horn Carly. I think that shows like how evolved you are as an entrepreneur. Like you recognize when we can recognize, just like Erica, you just said the same thing. Like when we can recognize our own shortcomings, then we can strategically find people to fill that gap. I think that's like really, really important for people, designers who are listening and are like, I don't know who to hire. I don't know what, because we get that question all the time, right? Who do I hire first? And I always say, look to your strengths and hire to your weaknesses so that can free you up to do the things that you are not as good at or that you don't enjoy doing.
Right.
But I'll also add that we're talking about roles. I think it's important for people to understand who are listening that roles are going to evolve. The positions that we have in each of our design firms, I can only speak for myself, but they have evolved and changed. So what I've learned is as we grow, I learned that we need somebody to take charge of that. And I don't just want someone doing AutoCAD now. I want them to be a project lead. Well, I didn't used to have a project lead, but now I do. And then also looking at the people who I have on my team, I have spent a lot of time figuring out what their individual strengths are, because I know we keep saying, like, if you're hired for a role, we don't want to put too much on them that's not for them. And I get that. But also sometimes you'll find that maybe somebody was hired as a designer and they're actually really strong. Like this happened to me. They're very strong when it comes to project coordination and the financials. And so that position has in my own company has evolved. So the person who was hired to be a designer is actually now more of a project coordinator. And I've hired designers to do design. So I think you have to be open to change as well and seeing that even if you're hired for a position that could evolve, but that can only happen, I think, if we as business owners are in touch with our employees and understanding where their strengths lie and where their shortcomings lie as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That person who does that coordination now came in as an intern, moved into the designer role. And then we realized that that's really where she wanted to be and where she excelled at and where she was drawn to. And then now she's been doing that and she's been excelling.
And
awesome.
You know what's funny that Rebecca, you're so right, because I always thought, and I still, I'm a huge believer in this. The reason why I can show the ropes to whoever I'm hiring is because I've done every single position. I wasn't the best at CAD. Could I do it? Absolutely. Like I would still do all of my own drawings, like starting off. Now I have an actual CAD technician who is just incredible that, I look at his work and I'm like, I wouldn't even know how to do that. Like, I mean, maybe if I sat at the computer for the next month and a half and it takes him about, a couple hours.
Don't do it. That's not worth your time.
No. So, so something like that, like I've done every single position, including the financials. So I'm able to really assist. However, because I did every single position, I knew and I was able to find where my strengths and my weaknesses lied. And so I think that works the same with when you hire someone on, when you were saying like you could hire a designer on, but they might not be the strongest in the design. They could be amazing at project, even on-site coordination, or they could be so good at, like, we have an operations coordinator who does like all of our orders and schedules all the load-ins and deals with deficiencies and all that kind of stuff. And you really have to be someone who's like super meticulous and organized for that. And exactly what you were saying, like you could come on to do one position, but maybe dabble in something else and really find out that that's where your strengths lie. And I think it's the same thing for us. Like we kind of have to remember that the reason why we can now bring on these people to do different positions is because we've done all of them. So we know essentially what we're missing and what we need in our businesses.
Mm-hmm. Like a big thing for me has been, I'm reading this book called Rocket Fuel. Have you read it? Have either of you read it? It's by the author of Traction, which is also one of my go-tos. Like literally, I have it beside mine. This is my Bible. Traction is my Bible, especially if you are looking to grow a team. I highly recommend you read it like 3 times, highlight it. I do everything that you hear. But Rocket Fuel has brought to my attention that I am a visionary. Just like Carly said, like that is my skill set. I am the visionary. And even though I can do, like Erica's saying, I can do all the things, I am not as good at integrating, meaning like I'm not good at holding people accountable. I don't want to deal with the details. I want to come up with the idea, come up with the strategy, but I want somebody else to implement. And so like my next hire, I think, and I'm putting this out into the world. So if anyone thinks they'd be great at this, you can drop me a note. I think I need to hire like an integrator, operations manager type person who can oversee everything else, who's below me, but above everybody else. Directly with me, but more so managing, like you said, like the sales funnel and like overseeing, because the day-to-day tasks fill up my calendar when really I want to be focused on like the coaching side and the visionary side and the marketing and that type of thing. And the bigger the company grows and the bigger my dreams get, the more I need help. And I think that recognizing our own shortcomings is like, for me, this book has been really, I've been reading it over the last week on audio, and I have the paper book so I can like cross-reference and highlight. It's really like, that's the best way to find, like, Carly, I'm so jealous, to be honest, that you have people in these roles in your company.
It took 4 years. I mean, she's been with me for 4 years. It took 3 years for her to be at the cadence level that Rocco and I need her to be. And she still has room to grow, but we like made that investment. Now, if she leaves tomorrow, I don't know, like it'll take time to put someone into that role and to teach them and to, integrate them and to offload them. Like it's not something that happens overnight. When people, have to understand that it takes really so much time. And if you're investing in someone who's going to be with you for a year and a half, it is not worth the investment if you're not able to see them in that role for longer than that. And you're doing a disservice to yourself and to them, because now they're starting from the beginning. And this is not a retail job. This is not a, marketing job. Like this is something where we're going to people's homes. There's, like you said, it's a bit more of the Wild West. There's so many variables. You're touching, thousands of different elements and vendors and products. And you need that stability. And, one of the things you talked about was, what's it called? I know what I'm talking about. So empathy, I think there's two, I think, aspects of hiring and firing. There's the business aspect of, who's that person? What is their role? But there's also the empathy aspect. And having empathy is such a massive aspect of having team members. And I will be honest, I am not the most empathetic person. I have to work hard at it. And it shows on my face and it shows in sometimes the interactions. And I'll be honest, like my team knows when I'm pissed. My team knows when I'm frustrated. My team knows when I'm stressed. My team knows when I don't like somebody. And the problem is like that empathy. So there's a book called, I don't know if you know what Brene Brown is, but she has a book called Dare to Lead. And, it's about being a leader and like having empathy and like, this is the way of the future. And like, that's what we built the collective on. But when you're actually in it, there's no empathy from both sides in many ways. And it's a bit of a farce, because at the end of the day, your employee comes to you and says, sorry, like I'm walking away. But well, what about the last, 2 years or 5 years? Or what about, where was the warning signs? Or why didn't you come to me when you felt this way? And, they're able to walk away and say, sorry, like it's your problem now. But yet you have to have all this empathy, and you read the books and you listen to the podcast and you try to like, but at the same time, you're still a human being. And it's just, it falls. I mean, at least in my current situation, the minute I was not empathetic and was a human is the minute that I lost that leadership and I lost that commitment from my team members. So I don't know. I'm again, like I'm there's two, and again, there's really two facets when you're hiring, when you're letting someone go, when you're maintaining and managing a team. And I don't know like what your thoughts are, but
I think you should stop being so hard on yourself. I think we are all going through this shit show together.
Yeah.
Like, girl, we all have ups and downs. Like, you sometimes like look at like the great things that you do have in your business. Look at this incredible person who's come up through the ranks, like within your own company.
yeah.
I think that's amazing. And it speaks a lot to your ability to lead. Guys, we don't have a lot more time. So I could keep talking about this forever. We might have to have you guys, we'll make this like a 3-part series or something. So before we go, do either of you want to share any last nugget of wisdom? And then please let the listeners know where they can find you to follow you on social.
Carly, you go.
No pressure.
Okay. I would say hire slow, fire fast. 100%. Okay. That's what all of the, entrepreneurial bigwigs tell you. And I 100% agree with it.
Yeah.
Also, I also believe that leadership really drives results, and making sure you're present as a leader and really learning those set skills, because at the end of the day, your business is only as strong as your team, right? So like for myself, I now have to do a deep dive, reread Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead.
Actually, that's on my reading list. I haven't read that one yet. I have to read that one.
It's a really good book. The problem
I know.
I have 2 babies. I have no time to read.
Audio. I just got Audible.
Hello. Sorry.
So that would be those would be my like unsolicited advice. People can find me at carriagelanedesigns.com or on Instagram at carriagelanedesign.build, and the Collective Workspace on www.thecollectiveto.com and on Instagram at the Collective Workspace. So thanks for having me, Rebecca. Nice to catch up with you ladies.
How about you, Erica?
So this is kind of like my, it's a phrase that I say all the time, is we need to celebrate our wins, but acknowledge our failures. And I'm a huge believer in that. And I think that has a lot to do with, being okay with making mistakes. So whether that be making a mistake of someone that you hired, or making a mistake of not knowing how to put someone in a proper position, but understanding what those mistakes are and then moving on and turning that into some sort of, into a win, really, and then being able to acknowledge a success that comes out of a failure. To me, I think that there's really no right or wrong answer in how you lead. And I think that it's really just, it kind of goes back to like your brand and who you are as a business and who you are as a person, and making sure that everyone understands that. And I always say, do your research when you're coming in for an interview, like know who we are, because there has to be that mutual understanding of that we're all here for that same goal. So I think that for me is kind of the, the essence of leading a good team, is that we're all here because we all have the exact same direction in mind. Thank you. How you can find us is, if you want to work with my team, or if you want to know more about us, we are on Instagram at Erica_Gelman, or you can visit our website at ericagelman.com. And
awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Honestly, guys, I just want to say thank you for being so open and honest. And especially Carly, thank you for sharing the hardships. It's easy for us to talk about things when we look back in hindsight, but for someone to share as they're going through it takes a lot of courage. So I just want to thank you very much for being so honest and upfront.
Oh, you're welcome. I don't know how much flack I'll get. Hopefully no lawyer letters.
No, you're honest. I think that's so important.
I don't put anything past anyone anymore, okay? Expect the worst, hope for the best.
I think it's so important for everyone to hear.
Yeah, you've both been
What?
so forthcoming. You've both been it's so good for everyone to hear what everybody has to say. We all have different experiences, but we share in this common need to learn and improve. So I just want to say thank you again.
Thank you.
We'll have you back.
Thank
Amazing.
you.
Whew. Okay, guys. How good was that? That discussion kept going after we turned off the recording. And I basically said to the girls, we have to do this again because there's so much value, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, in hearing other people go through things that you're either going through or you're afraid you might go through or that you hope to go through. There's so much learning by sharing. I really hope there was something in there for you that you were able to take away. I know I'm still constantly rejigging and shifting roles and finding ways to better my team, add to the team while balancing the finances. It's not easy, but it is the only way to grow. Anyhow, thanks for joining, guys. Again, please, if you haven't already, can you leave me a review for the podcast? It would mean the world to me. And I'll see you soon.